Today, it's my pleasure to have an interview with Jack Lyon, who is baritone of the Most Happy Fellows. The Most Happy Fellows were a wonderful piece of evergreen history. We're delighted that this is where they call home. And Jack has shared with me over the years several wonderful pieces of insight and stories, and we wanted to capture those today. So Jack, welcome to our interview. Glad you're with us.
Thank you very much.
Let's dive right in. How did the Most Happy Fellows come to be, and how did you hook up with them?
Well, they apparently got started without me. I'm looking at a message that's coming in here. What in the world is that? Postponed. Okay, this will be of no interest to anybody looking at this. It got started apparently around 1970 sometime, and without me. And it was the same four sang for 10 years, and they were very popular. And it was one of those things, I think, eventually that happens in families, it happens in church fellowships, it happens in barbershop quartets, where people's vision of what they were doing with the original four began to have a parting of the ways. They had different ideas of how they should proceed. So eventually, the baritone quit, Bob Jones. He quit the quartet, and so they were free. By the grace of God, at this point, I would say I also was a baritone who left a quartet which was dissolving. The lead wanted to dissolve, and I was cut loose and free about the same time that the quartet, that the Most Happy Fellows had an opening. So one day I was talking to Larry, and he said that they had an opening, and he wondered what I would think about singing. That was just him doing it, not the quartet. And I said, well, I'm footloose and fancy free. We could see how this seems to work out. And so that was all that was said ahead of time. That was near the end of 1976. And so nothing more was said, just Larry's and my conversation about the potential of me joining that quartet, but no commitments. And so came New Year's Eve, and Gloria and I celebrated New Year's Eve at the end of 1976. And eventually we went to bed, and it eventually became 2 o'clock in the morning, and it eventually the phone rang, and the voice at the other end of the phone said, Jack? I said, yeah. And he said, this is Lloyd Steinkamp. Now that was a famous name back then. He was everything to everybody in the society, and everybody loved him. And he had one of those traveling jobs where he'd go from chapter to chapter and pep them up and that sort of thing. So anyway, he said, I'm over here at Ken Hawkinson's house, and Larry is here, Larry and Bob Hodge. And so the three of us are here, and we were wondering, how would you like to win a medal? I said, excuse me? He said, how would you like to win a medal? I said, you mean in the barbershop world, right? And he said, yeah. I said, well, it's not for me my desire would have nothing to do with whether I'll ever have one or not. And he said, well, we have a Most Happy Fellows quartet here, which has no baritone. And we would like it if you would join the quartet. He was coaching the quartet at that time. And so we'd like it, and the guys would all like it if you could become the baritone. really? So I said, well, could we wait till morning? I mean, it's 1:05 here. And so anyway, one thing led to another. We went to a meeting that morning, New Year's Day, 1977, over at Ken Hawkinson's house. And we talked about what would it be like if we had a quartet with Jack as a baritone. And so the conversation, and it was 4 wives or 5 wives and 5 guys, a quartet and a coach and his wife. And it was a very interesting conversation. They were saying how things kind of went downhill interpersonally in the other situation, and that was enough. And then we began talking about what next. Well, what they'd said is they would like to continue to be a quartet because they had nice matching voices, and they'd known me for a long time when I was in Spokane. We'd known each other for 25 years before that, and as outside of the quartet. So anyway, eventually I said, okay, I'll do that. And then I said on one condition, or one thing that I have to take into account, and I'll tell you about it now. Here's 4 wives, 5 wives, and 5 guys. And I said to them, these days in the barbershop world, famous quartets seem to be roving, how would you put it? Guys who are interested in finding a girlfriend, regardless of any other considerations. And there was quite a bit of it going on that time. So I was aware of it. So what I said to the guys was, if I were to join you and we were out on the road doing a show, and there was the slightest hint that any of us would get into that kind of pattern, I would be on the next airplane, go home, and we'd be all through. And at that point, Ken Hawkinson's wife began to weep. And it turned out to be Joy. So with that being the only condition, we said, yeah, let's go ahead. So we had a quartet, and it lasted for the next 35 years, and got better and better as time went along.
Great. Could you mentioned that Lloyd Steinkamp had been coaching these guys before, and then he continued to coach you pretty intensely for a long time. Could you talk about that relationship and what he meant for the quartet and how he impacted you folks?
Okay. Well, at the beginning of his, in the first place, all barbershoppers knew Lloyd Steinkamp because he was a traveling disciple, he was out there waking people up to barbershopping. And he also knew all of us, each of us, because of our contacts in the past. And a few months, I think about, we were talking about December or January 1st, and about 4 months earlier, there had been a contest up in Canada, and the form of the Most Happy Fellows that was together at that point competed. And Lloyd was in the judges booth. And after the competition was all over, and I happened to be standing in the lobby when Lloyd walked up to those other 3, and he said to them, "You guys didn't win, and I think I have a clue on what you need. Would it be okay if I coached you, became your coach?" So this was not including me. This was the predecessors. And so he did that for a time. And I spoke wrong. This was not in the tail end of 1976. This was a couple of years before that. And so he became their coach, and was the coach who made the call to me to be the replacement baritone. And so in he came, and I didn't know a lot of the things that were true about him. I knew him as a a representative of the society, but not much beyond that. So anyway, it turns out that as a young man, from age 12 or something like that, he was living in the Bronx, and he was over on Broadway a lot. He had a natural attraction to Broadway. So he got some little jobs, and he got some better jobs in that. And he was a part of the operation there in New York that generated commercials on the radio and maybe on TV, I don't know. But so he took to that like crazy. It was part of his instincts were just matched up perfectly for him to know how to produce vocal music, how to approach, how to be attracted to an audience, and how to attract them to you so that a friendship develops. He had been through that as a young man in his teens and into his 20s, and was a recognized guy that the professionals in New York could lean on for wise advice. And here he was, when I accepted the baritone slot in the HAPS, here this professional doer of what we wanted to do was our coach. Well, what I felt like doing then was looking skyward and saying, thank you so much. And, it was too much and we soon discovered that the four voices of we singers matched perfectly. We didn't have to adjust anything. And Lloyd came along being the optimum professional quality coach. We didn't have to do anything. It was just one of those inevitable good moments. And so Lloyd stuck with us and coached us. Soon after that, we had a few shows. They had a few shows that were booked. And now I went with them as the new baritone. And by the way, I found myself having to learn a song a day for 2 months. The baritone line by itself, which is really a lousy thing to listen to. But on the way to work, I would learn a song, the baritone line on a song. On the way home from work, I would learn another song. The next day, two more. And meanwhile, we'd get together and prepare as much as we needed to so that we were coordinated on stage. And we picked up these, they were all local shows in the Seattle and Tacoma area. And so things went well, except in the very first show, they all, by the way, had said, okay, will you be the MC, Jack? Because Bob was always the MC and we didn't have to do that. So I was the MC. And I had some kind of a faux pas happen when I was in new territory as far as who I was representing. And so I screwed up the baritone prowess that I really had when I was used to it, but that I was not used to this one yet. And so it was a little funny, it was a little embarrassing, and so on and so forth. And after that show, which came across very well, it was for an organization of people, not barbershoppers. But after we got back to where we could talk to each other again, I said, I hereby swear that will never happen again. Where I draw negative vibes, for us, it's not going to ever happen again. And as far as I know, it didn't ever happen. There were probably a few people who could tell me about it if they wanted to, but I don't think so. It all worked. So I could handle talking on the mic. Kenny was an excellent bass. Bobby was an unbelievably fine tenor. And Larry was an unbelievably comedic, but excellent singer. So we had a variety of talents, all of which fit. And when we would sing together, everything clicked. We didn't have to go through the agony of trying to adjust the highs in somebody's voice, or the late entrance that was habitual for somebody else, whatever. None of that occurred. And so we got the idea that we were on the right track.
What a fun thing to walk into something that works well right away.
As far as I'm concerned, it was a miracle.
Talk a little more about what Lloyd taught you about the audience and your relationship with the audience as performers.
Okay. Now he had seen us perform, had seen the other combination perform, but he had never seen us perform except when we finally ended that first meeting and we did some singing. And so what he did was he arranged his personal schedule so that he could be in the front row of every show we were going to do. And they were booked pretty solid. It was a very popular quartet. And so he was at each show for, I'd say, a couple of months. And that would have been 5 or 6 shows. And in that short period of time, he saw all of the things that we were oblivious to, but were harmful to our effectiveness. And so he would sit us down and talk to us from the platform that Broadway built, a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom. And here we were just doing the best we could to get along. And he was giving us this expertise that was an amazing and second miracle. And so he watched us, and then immediately after each of that initial batch of shows, he would sit us down and say, the worst thing he did was this, and the second worst thing was this, and the third worst thing was this. And it had to do with things like, Larry, don't be making jokes and jabbing around in Bob's chest while the MC is talking. Pretend to pay attention to the MC if you have to, but don't take up a comedy act in behind him. That was one thing. And then he had a bunch of things. When we would finish a song, he wanted us to be beaming at the audience and walk right on top of the footlights to get as close as we could to them and look at individual faces all over the place and share that glance, and subtleties like, what do you do while they're clapping? Well, you pick your nose, I guess. But he got us out of the job of assuming how we should be, and he gave us gems of advice on our appearance. And here's one of his sayings to us. He said, what you got to realize is that when they say, and here they are, the most happy fellows, and you first break the curtain, everybody in the room decides if they like you or not, right there. So keep that in mind, he said, as you enter the room. Pretend that you're walking in and there's your mother, who you love so dearly, and you haven't seen her for 6 months, and she's waiting for you with a bowl of hot soup even, or something like that. And react to having found a place you love and people you love. And that would be up to you individually. And don't try to make it up. Recognize that's the truth. And go ahead and react. And that was just exemplary of his wisdom throughout everything. Things like the choice of songs, to find songs that mean something to each of us in the quartet, so that we know where we speak when we say something was sincerely this or sincerely that or loved that. And it was just so full of advice, which was so obvious, but hidden. And most people don't get laid out for them the way he did for us. And so then at the end of, after each show, he would have an afterglow with us and say, well, you failed there, you failed there, you failed there, but it's easy to get rid of that. And he would go right through it. So we had our own Harmony College after each show through maybe a dozen shows.
Oh, wow.
That was for openers from him. And his fatherly advice delivered that way was something that he continued to do. His job for Kenosha was to travel the country and meet with chapters here and there for his job. And so he was able to arrange his schedule such that he would cut through Seattle more often than normal. And he could then get together with us and we'd have a schedule. We'd have a unscheduled coaching session ongoing through the first couple of years. And so he got to embed this stuff. And when he would catch, for example, one of the quartet, probably Kenny, but I'm not sure, somebody would say something derogatory about some quartet who they didn't like. He'd say, let's say for a minute that this quartet is somebody you don't know, and they may have all kinds of different things may have just happened in their lives and in their quartet. And now they're out there trying to do things they're not accustomed to, which is just show off how good they can sing in front of a bunch of people. And so I think it would behoove you to think about how much you love them rather than how much you critique them.
Wow. And how do you get to that spot?
Okay. Lesson number #1, you know. And so on the path of knowing how to behave physically and vocally in front of an audience, he also taught us, I think it was Jesus who said in the Sermon on the Mount, if you will love one another, you will be so happy. And you know, he never made it a biblical thing, but to me it rang true. And it's the secret that people could use in daily life, or quartets could use on the stage, or and if you wanted to succeed by wanting to be admired or at least appreciated, this is some of the ingredients. The truth came out, and Lloyd he didn't preach religion to us at all, but he struck a few chords here and there that really rang true. And so on we went, and pretty soon he said, I've always wanted to do the Wizard of Oz, to arrange it. So what would you think about arranging the Wizard of Oz? And we all said, yeah, but I didn't hear Larry say anything. And what Larry said, this was with all our wives, all 5 wives and all 5 of us in the room. And Larry says, who's going to be Dorothy? And Lloyd said, well, you wouldn't. He went on with something else. And Larry said, I'm not going to do that. No. And it turns out with his comedic instincts, nothing could have been more magic. But he and Lloyd then left the room. We were in the family room. They went into the living room, closed the door, and you could hear in the background, you hear something, boom. You know, they were banging around on the walls and arguing this point. And Larry lost. And it was a little while later, a few rehearsals and a show. that Larry decided, hey, I'm at home here in this part. One of many gems of wisdom that Lloyd gave us.
That's good. So you were involved in quartetting, or the quartet was involved in going to international for a number of years. And you were scoring in 14th, 21st, 7th, in that range.
But that
wasn't you.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you're in the mix in January of 77 and you decide to saddle up and go to the contest in the summer. How did that contest unfold? And obviously, you know, this is the one you won. Tell us about that. Were you expecting to win it?
No, not at all. We didn't think in those terms. That was a non-issue. I mean, only really good quartets win those things, you know. We weren't thinking about winning. We were thinking about surviving.
But Lloyd said he was going to get you a medal.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. He said that at the very beginning. How would you like to win a medal? Well, I don't know. Two things happened at that prelim, which was over in Idaho somewhere. And one was that we won and beat some quartets that were very good and that we had admired in the previous year's contests and things like that. And the other thing that happened was Larry, my now lead, came to me and said, would it be all right with you, Jack, if I dated your daughter? My answer to him was, you need to ask her because she's her own woman. She was 19 or whatever it was. And so those are the two important things that happened. We won and didn't expect to. And Larry got an answer he liked. And to this day, they're married for many, many moons now and have marvelous children and all that. So it all became woven into this wad of blessings that all were just falling on us, just coming. You know, where did Lloyd come from? Where did the opening come from? Why was the timing so good? And what about the family growing? My goodness, you know, it just seemed too good.
So when you were at international, were you feeling a lot of magic in the quartet's performances? Was the audience responding?
Yeah. Yes. What I noticed was that we not only had 4 appropriate voices and levels of prowess, but we also had distinctly different roles. I could ad lib. I don't know why I ever acquired the ability to ad lib. Larry has never done anything for very long seriously. His clown instinct comes out all the time, including in church. And Kenny, he said, I'll handle the bass. You just worry about yourselves. So he was in charge of the local ego. And Bobby Hodge, as I put on the back of one of our albums, Bobby Hodge would be the envy of every Irishman in the world because he had a tenor voice that would kill and a heart to make it magic. And so, you know, we were just given all this stuff. We were all the same height. Everything was kind of, we're just standing there shaking our heads as to how fortunate we had become, the way things were going together. But still, when we won the prelim and won the right, therefore, to go to Philadelphia, we didn't anticipate anything. You know, we hoped we'd be able to sing twice anyway. And Lloyd Steinkamp, a fantastic arranger of music and a fantastic arranger of lives, I'd say also. But he arranged it, and he put together a 3 outing plan and music. So there were links between, just like vaudeville, you know. You'd hear the first one, and then you kind of like that. Then you see the second one, you get these hints about something that tied into the first outing. And then again with the third one until he would build it just like they would do a vaudeville act. It's going to play on Monday and then Tuesday and then Wednesday. And so, you know, all of this stuff was falling out of the clouds to us. And then I have to say that somebody who I don't recall who it was, but somebody from the judges panel, after we had 2 outings, and it was between events, and I was walking down a hall in the theater, and this judge was walking the other way and toward me and past me. But as he went by me, he went, I said, "Are you supposed to do that?" Don't they tell you not to do that? And then I talked to him after the whole week was over, and we did win. We couldn't believe it. He said, "I thought so." Well, keep it to yourself until the whole week is over next time. And when we were backstage, waiting for the announcements about who won after the final outing, and it was real quiet in the audience because the MC was talking, and we're backstage with only a curtain between us and the microphone, you know, and so somebody decided to tip us off ahead of time. And so they walked over to us, and there were people meandering around chatting and whatnot backstage while the MC was building up to the announcement of the winners. And so he walked up to us and he said, "You know, I think you've got an excellent chance of winning this thing." And Kenny Hawkinson, being Kenny Hawkinson, in the biggest bass voice you ever heard in your life, we're backstage where we can be heard if we go loud enough by the audience. He says, "You're kidding." That's how confident we were.
Oh.
Yeah. And then when they finally announced us, Larry Hassler has become well known to have said to me, they said, "And the winners this year are the Most Happy Fellows." He turned to me and said, "We just got started on learning vowel sounds. We're not supposed to do this." So when he walked out, he went into one of his comedic processions, and you know, we're just lucky all the way, every aspect of everything.
So what was that next year like? You got your nifty blue ribbons and gold medals, and now you were a hot commodity. What was your schedule like?
Well, nothing happened much. There were a few shows in the fall after the convention, but the mailbox was jammed full for every weekend in 1978.
Every week?
Hawaii, England, Miami, all these far-flung places from where we live. Yeah, and it just came in, and I was looking at they used to have these things. They used to have these things. These are the little, keep track of where you're going to be at a given month, or what do you want to remember, just memory books. Quartet pocket calendar. And in here, I see 1977 had some things like a contest, but 1978, it was every weekend. We were out of town doing a show every weekend.
So what does that do to family life? I can't imagine that being anything other than a strain after a while.
Well, we found the solution to that. We would ask the chapter for 8 tickets, airplane tickets. We want to bring our wives. So we did. So we didn't leave them alone while we had our fun. We always included them.
That's pretty neat. Did you burn through most of your vacation at work to do all this?
Well, luckily and unluckily, I was a half owner of a company of a smelter, and so I didn't have any trouble getting permission to go. But my partner saw some value in all this, and so he tolerated me going off being a quartetter, semi-professional quartetter, and we kept on going. We got into trouble later and went bankrupt, but it wasn't because of barbershop.
Well, when you and I have talked, you talked about Lloyd's work with you and your work as a quartet to be more genuine in the music you were doing and in your connecting with the audience. And I think at one point you mentioned there were 2 phases to that process. What went on there? How did you
I'm sorry.
How did you accomplish that transition, which turns out to be fairly unique? I mean, not a lot of quartets succeed in this dimension.
Right. Yeah. Well, Lloyd had a new, there was a lot, as you mentioned, the people who were in educating barbershoppers in those days, at least, would say, smile. And that's maybe about it. But look at the people in the 5th row, or some of these general guidelines. But to change your own attitude about being on stage in front of a bunch of people who have cast their lot with you, anticipating wonderful things, to be sure and give them wonderful things genuinely from the actual us to the actual them. That was the way I would describe the new part of what Lloyd began to train us to do. He would hear us, for example, he heard us one time talking about a quartet that was kind of clumsy. They were going through the motions of everything, but they weren't getting anything that was clicking, and somebody commented on that, and Lloyd heard the comment, which was not positive in any respect. And he came down on us, he said, look, if you're going to walk around entertaining negative thoughts about your buddies who sing barbershop harmony, you might as well go out and get yourself another hobby, because you're going to screw this up. You've got to learn to love everybody on the other side of the footlights, on the other part of the convention, and the other part of your quartet. You better learn to love each other. And I mean sincerely. In other words, I'd lay down my life for you. I would I would share anything I have for you because you are valuable to me and I think the world of you. And you wouldn't strain that through the criterion of whether this guy can perform really well or not. He's a human being and he has the same hobby you do. And we got lectures of that nature all the time as we gradually got the idea that he was serious and that it worked really well to do that.
Okay.
And you ended up with remultiplying your fan club, and they thought they were just digging in farther to their enjoyment. They wanted to enjoy good barbershop. They were happy, and we were happy because, but the foundation of it was we were doing for our friends what anybody would want their friends to do for them. Good old Lloyd. He should have written a book.
Yeah. Could you tell me more about how your quartet went through each of your songs to find the meaning in the songs?
Okay. And this, we did a good job for the first 15 years of our from winning, and we did a really good job. But then we discovered, or we heard one day about the habit that Frank Sinatra had. Now, Frank Sinatra was admired because of his ability to move the hearts of people who listened to him. When he'd sing a ballad, you felt it because of the way he treated it. And so we dug into that a little bit further, and we found out that Frank Sinatra, when someone would write the lyrics of a song and put them to notes and hand them to him as a proposal, he would put the music aside and read the poem. And if it meant something to him personally, then he would proceed further. He'd say, how would I recite this poem? Because I dig it. I've got some ownership here in this particular expression and poem. How would I deliver that? And then he would say, okay, let's look at the music. He'd finally get the music out. He didn't even look at it. He just looked at the poem at the beginning. So we were reading these things. And then we went through, and eventually, or not so eventually, it was almost all the time, Frank Sinatra was known for singing in such a way that you were moved. The listener was moved. That was what he was famous for. So anyway, we decided one time that we would begin to follow that example. And so we would review our 120 songs that they had built up while I wasn't even there, and see which ones met those criterion, which would mean that if you read the poem from a given song that they had been doing, over 100 of them, would that pass muster and actually touch our emotional self in the quartet? And so we went looking at that. We were throwing them out left and right and highlighting some that did that job for us. Then we kept our eyes open for new songs that would do that. But that became the basis for us approving a song for ourselves. It wasn't just, does it have the right range, which of course was obviously necessary too, but it had to do with, do we care about this? Personally, each of us. And we never picked up another song that didn't meet that criterion. And the effect it had on our delivery was noticed by a lot of barbershoppers.
You talked about going to do a show back in Nebraska at Bob Hodges' hometown. and how that sort of took a different turn
Yeah.
than a normal show. Could you walk us through that?
Okay. Yeah. Bob had grown up in that town, and so he was surrounded all the way by relatives and people who still lived there and knew his family. And we had adopted this new approach to what we would present to our audiences, the material, and how we would present them. And one thing I want to slide in here just before we finish the story about Bob Hodge, and that is that we, once we discovered that we wanted to be genuine, we actually are affected by this song, and we want to share it with you. It became a requirement for us to be moved. So in rehearsal, we changed the tone of things when they would rehearse. Now the quartet always rehearsed at my house for some reason. I think we were centrally located, and so they would come in and we would rehearse, and there would be the usual reactions to various things. If something didn't work, somebody would blame somebody else, or say, I don't like that song. There were a lot of negative things that happened and things that were imperfect. But we'd struggle along to get that song so it would be presentable in a contest or elsewhere. And when we got into this new mode, I took a wastebasket, put it by the front door, and I told the guys, this is me talking. I'm not the boss, but this is what I suggest. When you walk in and you see the wastebasket there, take your ego and put it in there until we're through rehearsing. Just get rid of any pride, any intolerance, any misunderstandings. Don't allow those things to come into the rehearsal with you. Leave them in the wastebasket. You can pick them up on your way out and use them wherever you care, but not in the quartet. And so we did that. And then the other thing was we reviewed our 120 songs and looked for those which were clearly not a part of us down deep in. And I'm not just talking about ballads, I'm talking about fun songs too, where it really ignites joy in us, So we looked over the repertoire and trimmed it down quite a bit. Probably got rid of 20 songs out of our thing, and began looking for replacements for those. And once we took the approach that we had learned about, that it had to affect us, we began moving on with our rehearsals, where we decided we would keep singing a prospective new song until we discovered that somewhere during the course of that song, each of us would experience a physical reaction to what we're singing about, because it was something important, or it was something moving, or I'd had an experience that reminded me of, or whatever. But somehow it became ours, each of us, probably in different ways, but that was what we began doing. And that was after we'd been on the road as champs for 15 years. So the next 15 years were and that show at Bob Hodge's hometown happened right about we were just about seeing the results of our new stuff. And so that was after 7.5 years, and the other 7.5 years we kept on going. Anyway, us being emotionally moved by songs to one degree or another. It wasn't all dramatic, but that became an important part. And so then we had something that we knew and we felt and we believed. So therefore we were kind of expert in that particular thing. And we wanted to share that. And that would take care of not only the serious songs, but also the comedy songs. If we didn't start giggling like crazy during a rehearsal because of the sheer pure comedy there was, we'd throw it up. But on the other hand, if something got our funny bone every time we started pushing each other around because it was so hilarious, then we knew we had something going. And so we rearranged our repertoire.
Okay, go back to Nebraska.
Pardon?
Go back to the show in Nebraska.
Oh, okay. So we did the show having pretty recently developed our new MO, mode of operation. And we went back to Bob's town where he hadn't been for 45 years. And we sang the show, and the audience went bananas, and so did we. It was different. It was better. It was a lot better. And so then there were about 120 people out of that audience, which couldn't have been over 300, who came to us after the show was over and said, would you be so kind as to come with us to some building they had access to nearby the show. You come over there and we want to go over there and listen to you some more. And so we did. And that was in the Tom Wilkie era when Kenny had died and Tom Wilkie was the bass. And we still pressed on with this. Regardless of new personalities getting into the quartet, it was still our MO. And so anyway, they took us over there. We began singing one song after another, and they were exuberant. I mean, unusually moved, I would say. And until we had essentially gone through all 120 or so songs, and it was now 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And and on the way back to the hotel, Tom Wilkie, who was relatively new to us, he said, I have never, and I've done a lot of singing and a lot of barbershop, but I have never experienced an environment like developed for us on stage, but also in the afterglow. He said that's life-changing for him, is what he said.
Good. In closing here, do you have any wisdom or guidance about being in a quartet that has some expectation of being around for a while?
Well, I've already told the things that were so essential to our persona and our style, and it works so well for us. One thing I would suggest is that you don't do everything hypothetically without personal involvement. Somehow you've got to reveal yourself to an audience to a degree in order for them to have something to attach to. And how you do that, it's a whole bunch of artistic subtleties that, we were blessed in a whole sequence of things that happened to us that led us down that garden path, and it worked for us. And I think there are probably 2,000 different ways to get the same result, depending on who it is that's trying to do it and looking for it. But honestly, giving of yourself to an audience is not a way to become popular. It's a way to be connected.
Great. Do you have anything else to add? It was a wonderful run of several decades, and I would
Oh, yeah.
imagine great memories.
All right.
Any nuggets that you want to make sure people hear or understand?
Yeah. Well, I highly recommend it, but don't ever get hung up with making the notes the way you deliver them absolutely perfect and having them be a cold museum piece to be admired because they're perfect. They don't give a shit. They don't give a darn about that. The audience wants you to love them. Any normal human being wants love. And there are all kinds of things we can share as one individual to another individual, or as a group of individuals to another group. And if we'll concentrate on that with our hobby, I can guarantee you it pays off.
Well, great. Well, you folks have certainly brought a lot of love to Evergreen and districts and audiences well beyond Evergreen. So thank you for your experience, and thank you for sharing your stories and your insight and your wisdom. And it's been wonderful.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks for agreeing to do the interview.
Keep singing.
Okay, will do.